Hi, my name is Emily Wu, and for my computer system security presentation, I decided to do it on Maze ransomware. I'll start talking about ransomware in general, go through the history of Maze, their techniques, tactics, and procedures, and then end up with actually the end of Maze ransomware. So a little background as to who I am. I'm a fourth year computing security student. I will be graduating this spring. I have an interest in defensive security, specifically digital forensics and incident response. I spent my first summer interning on the other side of security, building red team tool for Parsons Cyber, but this past summer as a full-time, and then this semester at part-time, I worked for Cisco on their Cisco Talos incident response team, and that's how I gained experience with working some incident response on some ransomware activity and kind of came up with this idea for this presentation. So before we can get into talking about Maze ransomware specifically, we have to talk about ransomware in general. And as you can see in the top right corner, that is just a small smattering of a bunch of different ransomware types that have been popular or are currently popular. And to answer the question, why ransomware, you have to think of illegal computer activity as a business because it is. It's just not a legal business. And as a business, you want to make as much money as you can, putting in, and you don't want to waste a lot of money if you can make a lot of money. And that's exactly what ransomware is. It's a spray and pray type of activity. There is no need to be subtle about it. You don't have to play the long game like nation state actors do to have to subtly infiltrate anything. Just however you can get into a network, get in, spread quickly as much as you can. If you want to, exfiltrate data and then just encrypt the network and demand money for it. It's nothing big and fancy, but it's very popular and it's very, very lucrative. In 2019, a bunch of different estimates have been made, and there's no really way to tell how much the ransomware industry made because not everyone's really going to disclose that they're paying the money because it is if it is legal in certain places, it is definitely frowned upon and is not advised by any really security companies to pay adversaries the money. However, many victims do pay because they do not want any downtime on their systems and they may not have sufficient backups to back up to. Some targets that are hit a lot by ransomware are hospitals, because hospitals have a lot of medical devices that may run on legacy software and aren't compatible with the most secure software, so that causes them to be vulnerable. And hospitals don't want to minimize downtime as much as possible because there are human lives at stake. And actually, in September of 2020, ransomware was kind of attributed to the indirect cause of the death of a person for the first time. A German hospital got hit by ransomware and had to turn away a patient who was dying because their devices were down and they couldn't treat her. And before she could make it to another hospital to be given medical care, she died. And because the first hospital had no way to treat her because they were infected by ransomware. Critical infrastructure also is a popular target because if you can hit critical infrastructure, you can affect a lot more people and they're going to want to get their business up very quickly and will be most likely to pay the ransomware. And now moving into Maze ransomware specifically, this is a smattering of companies and offices that Maze has hit. As you can see, it's very spread out between, there's a defense contractor, there's a city, there's an IT company, there's a camera company, and there's a school system. So it's not specific as to who they want to hit. Now going into the history of Maze specifically, Maze was first known to start acting in around May of 2019, although it was not known as Maze at the time. It was originally called Cha-Cha because Cha-Cha 20 is is one of the cryptographic algorithms that they use to encrypt victims' networks. Most of the victims, approximately 3/4 of the victims, are in the United States. This is because a lot of the phishing and spam kits that are used to get into the victim's network are in English, and so you want your victims to be of that language. However, as you saw in the previous slide, they are not super specific on what vertical they want to hit and encrypt with ransomware. There's no one specific Maze team of like 5 guys sitting in a basement with dark hoodies deploying Maze everywhere. There are multiple people in multiple groups deploying it. So techniques, tactics, and procedures may vary throughout different deployments of Maze, but they're all pretty similar. They may started off with just exploit kits and spam. However, ransomware is very lucrative and it's not very difficult. And so they soon started shifting to deploying ransomware to make more money. Along with that shift, Maze was the first ransomware group to actually start exfiltrating data of victims and using that as another incentive along with network encryption to get ransom money out of the victims. Previous groups have threatened victims with the release of information if the ransom was not paid. However, Maze was the first group to actually publish victim data publicly. This was done by exfiltrating the data over FTP and then publishing the victim data on their public leaks and quote shame site, Maze News. Don't go to the link. I defanged it because, don't go visit a link for an illegal actor. Exfiltration was threatened, and then they did it first because it creates another incentive for victims to pay money. They don't want to have their confidential and sensitive information leaked out to a bunch of illegal actors. Since Maze first started encrypting data, other ransomware actors have followed, such as Revel, Sodom Canidi, DoublePaymer, and NetMe. Maze, while it is its own group, had kind of formed what the media has called a quote Maze cartel through their cooperation and work with other ransomware operators. There's also, along with working with them, security researchers have seen some shared resources between the different members, along with members of different ransomware groups that are a part of this quote cartel to have the data that they acquired from victims be published on the Maze Leaks website that I talked about on the previous slide. So a few ransomware organizations that have joined forces with Maze include Lockbit, Ragnar Locker, Suncrypt, and Conti. What's interesting about Lockbit is known to be ransomware as a service. So that's basically more of where the ransomware software is made, and it can be sold on the dark web for anyone who wants to deploy it. The more efficient and better a ransomware as a service is, the more expensive it is going to be bought to buy for adversaries. Another interesting point with Conti is over the beginning of this summer in 2020, it was noticed that Ryuk went down a little bit as far as deployment, and it seemed like a lot of Ryuk actors switched to Conti because it shared a lot of similar tactics, techniques, and procedures as Ryuk, but it has been confirmed by some websites that Conti kind of joined the quote Maze cartel. Now going into a specific timeline of how Maze works, this kind of lays out in a 21-day type infection. Ransomware can get into a network, move laterally, and encrypt all in less than a day. So obviously this timeline will vary throughout engagements, but general timeline follows kind of like a general attack lifecycle, which we'll go into more deeply in the later slides, where Maze gets in, they do an initial compromise, they deploy Cobalt Strike to learn about the environment, and they compromise admin accounts in the first third of the attack. In the middle part is where reconnaissance comes into play, lateral movement, and then through that, Maze will start uploading and exfiltrating data from the victims before they get into ransomware spreading, which is the last part of the engagement, where they'll spread ransomware through PSEC or WMIC that is executed on domain controllers that they have compromised, spread the ransomware, deploy it, got the notes, and get out of the environment, or not necessarily get out of the environment, but the mission is complete, and now the victim has to deal with getting their systems back online and restoring confidence in their systems and deploying patches and fixing the vulnerabilities of how Maze got in. So going deep into the attack lifecycle, I have in the top right corner what the general attack lifecycle looks like for any type of security attack. And I have listed what are general ways that Maze fulfills each step of the life cycle. So along with basically most security compromises, a lot of it is through phishing, and phishing with a macro-filled Word document. You can trick a user to download a Word document and enable editing, then you can have an infection on their workstation. If it's not going to be the large percentage that is a phishing scheme, it can also be, they can also get into a victim's environment through OpenRDP. You can just brute force an RDP password, you can get in. Weak Citrix passwords, so basically any way from these two, remote connecting for employees. Adversaries can also remote connect into, which Maze has done. And then overarching umbrella to like OpenRDP is misconfigured internet-facing systems. You don't want your RDP to be open to any IP address. You want to tamp that down as much as possible. However, as I've seen in the past with my work at Cisco and as Maze has seen and taken advantage of, not every company does that. There's a lot of misconfigurations going on in the world. After Maze gets into the network, they want to establish a foothold and maintain persistence in this network. So this can be done, Maze has done this through installing beacon payloads. A lot of those beacon payloads may be downloaded through the macros in the macro-filled Word document. These beacons will reach out and will help maintain a presence on the network. And Maze will also want to try to maintain multiple accounts, and if they can, multiple admin accounts. That way, let's say if the victim notices that one account is acting a little suspiciously and they disable that account, Maze has a backup account to use to keep their presence in the victim's network. However, a lot of times those OpenRDP or those people that download a macro-filled Word document and fall to a phishing scheme are people that are just general users in a company. They may be salespeople, they may be HR, they could be anyone, but they most likely won't be someone that has domain admin credentials. So the next step that Maze wants to do, they want to escalate privilege, they want to have domain admin, they want to be able to deploy things across the network, and you need an admin to do that. So in order to escalate privileges, Maze has been known to have the victim download Mimikatz within a zip or within a malicious document. And with Mimikatz, they can do credential harvesting and get credentials for admins throughout the network. Bloodhound can be used in this step and the next step. Bloodhound is very good to learn about the domain and to get domain credentials and get those privileges. And there's also a built-in Windows tool that could be used legitimately or illegitimately. Procdump has been also used by Maze in the past. Moving on to the back half of the attack lifecycle is recognizance. So here, Maze wants to learn as much as they can about the victim's network so that they can then spread as much as they can throughout the victim's network. So a lot of Cobalt Strike deployments happen in the recognizance phase to collect information about the victim's network, about the host they're currently on, file systems, and about the domain. Along with that, they can also use built-in Windows commands that's kind of more like living off the land. And they've also been known to use AdFind and PowerSploit to do reconnaissance. As I typed up here, Maze has used 2.bat. This is a batch script that contains a bunch of different NSLOOKUP commands, so doing DNS resolution. And output of this 2.batch script has been outputted by Maze to a 2.txt file in the past. Now, and as I mentioned before, Bloodhound can also be used for domain reconnaissance. After reconnaissance is done, you now know more about the network and about the systems you're on. Now it is easier for you to move laterally, and you can do this through Cobalt Strike beacons. And kind of going back to initial compromise, you can also tunnel through RDP to other systems. Maze has done that both in the past, and Maze, an actor who deployed Maze, has also used Metasploit, which later deployed Cobalt Strike to move laterally. So there's a bunch of different options, and now Maze has spread throughout the network on many, many different machines in a victim's environment. Now they're at the last step in which they want to complete the mission. They want to do their data exfiltration and then drop the ransomware binary and encrypt the networks. So when Maze exfiltrates data from a victim's environment, they have most likely done this. Well, they have done it and will most likely continue to do it over FTP using PowerShell. And the PowerShell commands will be base64 encoded. So unless you go into a decoder, you won't really figure out where it's beaconing out to. They will also want to have a compromised FTP server so that they can spread their ransomware out over FTP to a bunch of different workstations, and then use WMIC or PSExec to remotely execute the ransomware across the network. So here is an example of a Maze ransomware note on the right. Obviously, the victim's not going to get it with a red box around it. That's just kind of showing where the specific key is for the specific victim. A lot of times the ransomware binary will be a .exe or a .dll, a dynamically linked library. Maze is written in C or C++, and it has a custom obfuscator, so victims can't really, it's very hard to deobfuscate it. As a part of the binary, Maze will delete the shadow volume copy with WMIC to try to make backing up as hard as possible. And what I found really interesting is that Maze has a hard-coded unique decryptor per victim in the ransomware binary, and it's RSA-2048 key. This is to make sure that if one victim pays Maze the ransom and Maze gives that victim a decryptor, that decryptor will only work for that specific victim. The victim can't then send the decryptor to someone else and have it work for that other victim. And as mentioned in the very beginning, Maze was called Cha-Cha because of it was a cryptographic algorithm that they used. And here they use Cha-Cha 20 and RSA, a combination of both. So around September, it had been noticed that Maze kind of started copying what Ragnar Locker has done, which makes sense because they're part of what some of the media has dubbed the Maze cartel. Ragnar Locker, in order to try to avoid detection by security scanning software, deployed their ransomware previously on victims' networks through a virtual machine. So they would put a VirtualBox Windows XP VM on a victim's machine with their ransomware on it and drop it there to have it spread to avoid detection. Maze used a similar process, however, it was a lot larger of a disk of almost 2 gigs, and they used a Windows 7 box, again, to avoid security software detection. And they had to go through a lot because it's 2 gigs for just a little bit of ransomware so that it can spread without being detected. Now, what was interesting as I was making this presentation is that Maze actually ended on November 1st of 2020. So in September, they started, they stopped encrypting victims' networks towards the end of September. And before the press release, they had cleaned all of the victims' information off their Maze Leak site. And then on November 1st, they officially shut down. In their press release that I have a screenshot of to the right, I didn't actually go there. This is from a news site. They denied an existence of of the Maze cartel. However, even though Maze is officially shut down now, Maze actors are not done deploying ransomware. It has been noticed that from the decline of Maze, ransomware that use very similar tactics, techniques, and procedures, and the same decryptor, egregor, and segment have started rising in popularity. So it is assumed that a lot of Maze actors just kind of pivoted to using egregor and segment. And that is kind of the history, the tactics, techniques, and procedures of Maze. And I'd like to thank you for your time.